Hey, one more thing before you go. Are we alone in the universe? Do you believe in extraterrestrial life? What do you do if you experience a UFO or an incident of the paranormal? Who do you report it to? Stay tuned. We're going to answer these questions and more when we have an individual on the show who aims to bridge the gap between the UFO, paranormal, and psychogenic communities, which we'll talk about, to collect data to assist in helping experiencers understand why they've experienced unusual and unexplained phenomena. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Hey, real quick note, if you're a fan of One More Thing Before You Go, please remember to subscribe, follow, and share it with your friends. My guest in this episode is Ryan Stacey. He's a private investigator and author, a citizen journalist, and an active Canadian ufologist in the Canadian Disclosure Movement. He's also a paranormal psychogenic investigator as well. We're going to explain all that. He's also the former national chief investigator for MUFON Canada and the director of field investigator training for MUFON National USA. He's the creator of the Ultra Spectrum Classification System and the founder of the Experiencer Support Association named TESA and the director of investigations. Stacey identifies as a phenomenologist. Stacey aims to bridge the gap between the UFO, paranormal, and psychogenic communities to collect that data to assist helping experiencers understand why they're having that experience. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What an amazing life that you've got. You are very diverse in everything that you do, and we have some
I don't.
things.
I don't hear that explanation very often. And I'm sitting here listening to it, and I'm like, I wish there was like one word that could kind of sum it all. And that's why I identify as a phenomenologist, because I'm someone who studies the phenomenon and how it affects the people. But it's you need those buzzwords in there to approach all these different factions. My belief is it's all connected. But how do I tell the UFO people I do paranormal? How do I do paranormal? I do UFO. Like that's just been a marketing challenge on my part. But I would prefer to be like, this is Ryan Stacey. You know who he is, but we're not there yet. We're not there
Yeah,
yet.
that would be that would be great. Ryan Stacey, here's my card. Call me.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know that you've got a well, like I said, you said a phenomenal background in everything that you do, from a private investigator on through investigating paranormal experiences and ufology and things like this. But I kind of like to back up just a little bit and kind of find out where it started. Where did you grow up?
Oh, of course. You're gonna ask personal questions on a recording here. So I'll be mindful of my area. So I grew up in a small town in Ontario, um, north a few hours north of Toronto. From there, I guess. Well, how far do you want me to go? Am I go whole life?
I
Like,
you, yeah. I mean, I know. Did you go to college, university?
yeah. So I went to college in Peterborough. So for police foundations, police studies, I had a huge interest in becoming a police officer. While I did that, I worked part time as a cook and a private security and private investigator. So I've been an investigator since 2009. I've been a security guard since 2005. I had always pursued a career in law enforcement. I passed all the testings. I applied to all the regional stuff. I just unfortunately didn't fit the demographics at the time. Didn't get in. But at the same time, working in the private sector and having the same credentials and the same knowledge in terms to get in for policing, I realized that I could just start my own private investigating and security company. And we're now in our 8th year, and we're indexed around community policing as a security company. And I'm very busy doing private investigations for my community around the area too.
That's fantastic, and I think, and thank you for your interest in law enforcement. As we spoke about before we started, as everybody knows, I'm a retired sergeant, so I respect you for what you've contributed. At the same time, I envy you a little bit because you have more freedom as a private eye.
Well, and it's funny because I speak to a lot of police officers that in some of these social meetings that I have, and they leave the force and they want to be a PI. But when but for me, not actually knowing what it was like to be the police
Right.
before becoming a PI, I don't have this kind of like PI should be easier and laxed. I have this approach where I'm trying to be equal to, or coincide with the police. So my emphasis on investigation is elevated because I never had that experience to work for the
Right.
government. I didn't have those restrictions. I investigate police officers too because, they're end of the day, they're people. They go through divorce, they cheat, they do those things. Small town. I know a lot about everybody, and if I looking back, and I've never talked about it to this respect before, but I think it's probably the best thing for me is I'm free, as you said, I'm free to help, but I understand. I understand law enforcement too, right? So a lot of my work, especially in the PI part, is to explain how the judicial system works, to explain how the police work, to kind of balance the emotions of the
Mhm.
client, to let them know that, like, yeah, I can investigate this, but the police are right, the courts are right, and there's nothing more that I can do for you.
Well,
Whereas
thank you for
some
that.
private investigation firms are like, yeah, I'll take your money and then wait, and then, yeah, we can't find anything, and then they're still upset and they're mad. So I'm actively involved in changing the world, but through privately, I guess.
Well, I
I don't know.
appreciate that. As a law enforcement officer, I appreciate that because that communication between us in the community isn't always that great, as you know. So being able to help those people understand and your clients understand, have a better perspective going into it is very helpful all the way around, including to the law enforcement community. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
How'd you get started in ufology and phenomena and the paranormal?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the sidebar is so I've always been a paranormal investigator. I've always been interested in ghosts and the paranormal. That's been my thing. But that was like while I was growing up, becoming working as a cook, working as security, going to college, trying to figure out my life, all these other things. So I always had an interest. So when it got to the point of my life where I made my own company for investigations, um, I guess I got involved with a client that believed their son was abducted by aliens. So just starting the business, I took the retainer and then I offered to do a locate, try to just locate the person. So I didn't think they were abducted by aliens. I just had need to find this person to prove that. So I ended up finding the person. Turns out that they joined Scientology. So it's somewhere in this spectrum of things, but not closely related to aliens unless somehow Scientology is involved with that. But I have no evidence to prove that at this point. But that's kind of how I got introduced to that. But in doing that, I had to join all these social groups, all these Facebook things and all this other stuff until the person surfaced. So I had leads to follow, and I stayed in those groups afterwards because I didn't join the conversation. And then eventually someone else had piped up and said, believed that they were a victim of a fraud or a theft because they purchased a manual and they didn't get it in time. So I piped up and said, I'm an investigator. I can help, because I'm still looking for clients. It's a new business. So it's something I was doing in my marketing. Um, and then that led me to learn that this manual that they wanted to purchase was from MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. It was a Canadian person, but so that led me to an investigation to be introduced to MUFON, which I was familiar with the X Files and all this other stuff growing up as a kid. Then I learned that there was a Canadian division, which I didn't know. So then I got a hold of the Canadian guy to find out that this was just a shipping delay because the money goes to the states and then the states has to ship the book and then all these other things. So the guy was just disgruntled. So that's how I got in. And then from there, Stu Bundy is the name of the director at the time. He's like, "So you're a PI and you do this for real?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What do you think about UFOs?" And I said, "Aren't those government machines?" And we had a laugh, and I still think that today. Um, And then from there, he asked me if I would consider becoming a field investigator. And I said, well, I don't want to pay any money into it. So he gave me the book for free. I ripped through it in like a day. I was supposed to take a month. It was like a primitive kind of thing, especially being fresh out of college and all that other stuff. So it was real easy for me. And then I started as a field investigator for MUFON. I got my first case, which was supposed to be a closed case because it was what they considered historical. I took that as an opportunity to show my skills, if you will, and I reactivated this cold case, for lack of a better term. I was able to contact the witness and the location, and I ended up doing a site visit. And then I did a big enough report that MUFON headquarters got a hold of. They published that case in their MUFON journal. And then throughout my career, I became the chief investigator for MUFON Canada. And then I was the director of field investigator training. So I was responsible for teaching everybody inside MUFON National at the time how to investigate UFOs. And then I also spent some time with the experience your research team, so the abduction research team with Kathleen Martin. So I was really involved with the abduction phenomenon. I started to see parallels with the abduction phenomenon with shadow figures and paranormal, making connections with all this other stuff. Then as a director in the national part, information was shared with me in regards to the to Jan Harzan, who was the previous executive director, and I passed that information on to the local authorities, and they followed that investigation and ultimately led to his arrest. So that is why I had to leave MUFON, and then when I left MUFON, I had an ethical issue.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Just
Yeah.
real quick.
Mhm.
Can you help our listeners and viewers understand what MUFON is exactly? I know what it is, but can you help us
Yeah, so
understand?
MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network. They've been around since after Project Blue Book. They are you can search them www.mufon.com. They're known. They're the biggest thing, the biggest organization, largest volunteer organization, um, with so many people. And unfortunately, they've gotten some bad rap over the last few years because their leader did some bad things. But they're recovering. They're doing well. There's still so many people in there, and I still have close friends with MUFON and all this other stuff too. However, on the business side, MUFON's not really happy with me because I'm a
Throw a
law
wrench in
enforcement.
it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but like it was passed to me, and I have a license, so I'm obligated to do so. So I did so, and it wasn't me. It was the California Police Agency who verified my tip and then caught him. So that's the thing that happened. So while that happened, there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety because I didn't want to leave the organization, and they couldn't make me leave either. But I was eventually forced out by a bylaw or whatever. But in the meantime, I needed to know what I wanted to do, which I ended up creating the Experience Support Association as a continuation of my work, with emphasis around all these ideas that I had with MUFON, to do that. Now, since I'm talking about that, years have passed. MUFON is now under new leadership and new directorship. I'm not quite sure if they're going to recover because of the way the United States is handling the UFO phenomenon now. But the door is completely open for them should they want to re-engage and work together. But I completely understand if they don't want to.
Well, I think ethically and morally, you did the right thing. I mean, it's obviously I'm a law and order guy anyway. So if somebody was defrauding people or misrepresenting and profiting off of that for some reason or however it played out, that's what should have been done anyway. So I think you did the right thing. Um,
Yeah, I believe I did too. It took a lot of stress to come to that conclusion, and it's been a while before I was able to open up about it. But I do want to reinforce that it's not the organization's fault. One bad person for people quit. Bad bosses, not bad job. Or sorry, yeah, bad bosses, not bad
yep,
jobs.
yep.
Uh, I would go back to MUFON in a heartbeat if I knew that there wouldn't be any hidden agendas or conflict. But unfortunately, I can't. So.
Well, maybe the possibility will open up.
Mhm.
Have you ever had an experience yourself?
Yes, so that is a part I kind of skipped out in that story, but if you go to the part where I'm leaving MUFON and then I'm starting with the Experience and Support Association, the idea came through what I'm calling a psychogenic experience, so of the mind, so which is translated to a what is believed to be a download experience. So it meets those archetypes and those criteria according to what other people have experienced. Me, I'm not quite sure who the source is. Yeah, I'm leaning towards government, perhaps, or maybe a creative moment that I had in a spew of trauma because I was upset that I had to leave this organization because the stain was there, and at the same time, I didn't want to abandon the people that needed the service. So I was trying to come up with a solution where I could continue doing what I was doing. And on the winter solstice on December 2018, I received a vision of this geographic shape, which is on our website, which you can find under symbols and icons, we call it the TESA map. And through that download artistic experience, I was obsessed about this symbol for many, many, many hours. I had to drive back from Peterborough because I still have family out there from when I was in college. Um, and I put it down on paper and I drew it out digitally. And that was it. That was my experience. That's it. I've never seen UFOs, never seen ghosts, never seen any of that stuff. Just do a lot of research. But this psychogenic kind of experience took me from a path of nuts and bolts and curiosity with the paranormal to actually like introduce me to how consciousness could be. And then it just opened up so many possibilities to that. And we're starting to realize that consciousness is the key to connect the people and connect all these phenomenons together. So it was kind of regardless of the source, because I couldn't say I'll never, but I have not enough evidence to confirm where the source is coming from. It's just I could believe, but that's still not, that's hearsay evidence as well. So I know enough that I can't go back to nuts and bolts, and I'm an experiencer now, but at the same time I'm a professional, so I confidently go back and forth between laws and math and rules, and then yet I have this weird um, experience that makes me crazy like everybody else. So it's a challenge, but I'm quite confident talking about it now, and it's a thing that happened.
Sometimes life happens and presents something to
Oh,
you that challenges our
mhm.
belief as we see it and or hear it. So I think that I personally believe that there is more to this universe than just us. I think that
I would hope so because there's a there's a lot out there.
yeah, it's just vast. I mean, well, even
Yeah.
with the new Webb telescope that's up there, showing the distant galaxies that are here. We did an interesting conversation, my wife and I, where we started looking at some of those pictures, and we found artists that were drawing those pictures similar, almost exact to some of what Webb telescope is picking up now. And you kind of
Hmm.
have to think about that. Where did they get that vision? Where did they see that enough to paint that or to draw that like that? Because all of a sudden, here it is in
Mhm.
this photograph. It's kind of crazy. Um,
And that happens a lot. There's a lot of left brain creative artwork that comes that from artists and drawers all over the place. And what if those are messages from a source? Music sometimes comes. I'm a
yeah.
musician too in another life. Some of my writing experiences come out of nowhere at the worst times in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, I feel creative. So it's that left brain kind of a thing, but we're tapping into which. So you mentioned in the biome the creator of the ultra spectrum classification system, and the ultra spectrum is the word that I'm using to identify this place. So the ultra spectrum to me is like the ether or the source or whatever. It's just a title or a label that I'm using to identify this location in which human beings have the ability to tap into to draw information from, whether that's during a sleep state we're dreaming. So where do our dreams come from? consciousness. Maybe this is life, this is a dream, and when we dream, we're actually alive. We don't know. So, and then when you have psychic abilities, moving things with your mind, where are they pulling that information from? Perhaps this source. When they have an ET experience and they can't take a picture of it, maybe they're seeing it in their mind. So where are they seeing it? Where are they drawing that image from? Is coming from this source. So I call that the ultra spectrum, because I study the people and how the phenomenon affects them, and the common denominator is they're all drawing from a similar place. They're just using different methods. They're meditating, or using a Ouija board, or they're praying, or they're just cutting their lawn and an idea comes to them. There is evidence of information floating around in this space, and the evidence also shows that we have antennas and we are able to pick up this information. The problem is, and this is where the law enforcement side comes in, is I'm not quite sure where this information is coming from, and it could be government influence. So there's a risk there. There's a concern, because it could be. It could be extraterrestrial, and if it is, does the government know about it? And if the government doesn't know about it, then that's a concern. If the government does know about it and they're not talking about us, that's another concern. So I look at this phenomenon. I approach this phenomenon as criminal activity. So if anyone is being abducted against their own will, that's against the law. That should be, anyways.
I agree.
If they are sexually molested by an extraterrestrial, that is against the law. And when I do regression hypnotherapy, sometimes we learn that in past life stuff, or further back in childhood, that it's these unfortunate events take place with family members, and they just decided to mask it with this illusion of extraterrestrial for all their life because it was easier to deal with. So there's a lot of that stuff that kind of happens. So when I approach this, when I do my investigations, I'm not looking to hold anyone accountable, but I'm trying to weigh both sides, or all sides, so I can understand the truth, to figure out what's happening in the middle, which is why I investigate all the phenomenon separately, but then the ultra spectrum is to bring it all together, to find that constant between all of it, to give that true reading of what really is happening. So to compare that to, I guess, law enforcement would be, you have all of your like case studies and all this other field, and you're trying to figure out why society is the way that it is, and at the same time trying to give recognition to the government part, understanding their perspective, understanding the people's perspective, understanding the hierarchy in both perspectives, because there's middle class, lower class, and higher class, and all of this stuff. So that's a whole mixed can of worms. And then you have these different factions, and what seems to bring all these people together, or seems to be common, is obviously the need for answers. But it's having these experiences that could be very similar in kind, but they're labeled differently. Which, for an example, let me see here, the paranormal orb. So, like, if you see an orb in the sky, we call the UFO community would just call that a UFO, or now a UAP, because they want to separate government machines from aerial phenomenon. Um, then you have the paranormal orb, who believes it to be spirit, and all these other things. And then you have dust from the skeptics that think it might be something on the lens. So all of those beliefs are true, but it's different perspectives. What's common is that there's aerial activity in the sky, and it's circular. So we need to look at that to determine the investigation. So in the ultra spectrum classification system, it would be labeled aerial activity. It'd be a sensory display, because it will take in consideration of it being seen in the mind as well as in the three-dimensional world, because we never know. And then it would be subcategory between machine or light, and that's the end of it. So if you want to call it, and it's done that way, so that way the UFO community can call it a UFO, the paranormal community can call it a ghost, the religious community can call it an angel and the spirit. Everyone has the ability to call it whatever you want, but we all must agree that it's in the sky, and it's aerial activity, and we need to investigate further, and then understand which person or which organization to contact to get that information. And then we can interpret what it may be afterwards. So once I remove all these labels, I'm starting to realize that some people are who think they're having paranormal experiences or experiencing perhaps experiencing entities from the extraterrestrial side, and vice versa. They think that they're ghosts when they share characteristics of what people have reported in the extraterrestrial. So even us as a human race are confused about these archetypes and labels because of Hollywood and all these other things, and not realizing that they're connected. And when you don't realize that they're connected, it makes it hard for the experiencer to accept it. And when we work with the experiencer, and I investigate all these little cases in the phenomenon separately, but also with the experiencer, and start to timeline it, I'm learning, I'm seeing a pattern of evolution. I'm seeing, um, I guess, a contact type event at an early age. Later on, there's beings observed, which could be extraterrestrial, could be paranormal. Who knows? Or just beings are observed, and then in their early adolescence, teen years, there's some poltergeist phenomenon, which also could be psychogenic, which could be them moving it, not realizing it. They think it's a ghost, but it could be them internally. Then as they get older, they're into Reiki, tarot cards, and then at the end of their life, they're full blown psychic. So these are all different stages of their lives, and they all have different experiences, but they're not concerned about paranormal, but they're concerned about this UFO. But it could be all connected. And when I understand this evolutionary process, so if that's how it's all kind of connected, because if this UFO thing happened back in the 40s or the 50s, like everyone thinks, and they have evidence of this technology where they can do all these other things, then perhaps what we're experiencing now, 80 some odd years later, is some sort of genetic manipulation from some tests that happened many years ago, and we're now evolved. And now that we're evolved, we have the ability to willingly tap into the ultra spectrum and use that. But because we're not encouraged to develop those abilities, um, we're often considered, spooks or um, not spooks. That's the wrong term to use. The spoofs or skeptics, or
Skeptics
crazy,
and
you know,
conspiracy theorists and
yeah, mislabel.
mislabeled and so forth. Yeah, I understand that. What a complex but brilliant approach to
Thanks.
investigating all this stuff. I have to commend you for that because the way you pieced that together and the way you laid it out from an investigator's perspective, I understood that immensely. I see how all that works together. And I can really appreciate that approach because of my background in my mind. That's the way I handled cases. So
Have
the
you
way
have you looked at the ultra spectrum classification? Have you seen it yet, or
I
no?
have not looked at the ultra spectrum
I'll
classification. This is
have to
first.
I'll have to send it to you, but it is on our website. So experiencersupport.org, and you go to the investigations tab, you'll see it under resources. It's there. Also, on top of that, I have an evidence scale, so which is another challenge that I'm having with these pseudo investigators too. Because here's the thing with the investigative side is in my analysis, in my research, there's a lot of people trying to help the people, but there's not a lot of qualified and credible people doing that. So there's a lot of risk for injuries and stuff. We don't have law enforcement for UFO and paranormal activity, which is why I'm trying to at least have that. But I don't need to hero it, but at least know that there's somebody in the field that has the background, has the qualifications, that could take a second look or verify that all this stuff is accurate before you go out to the internet and all these, or go out to the paper and do all these other things. So in part of that, it's explaining to the community what evidence, different layers of evidence, and what types of evidence can be stacked to build your case. So in the journalistic point of view, they want demonstrative or documentative evidence where they can have a physical photo or physical audio, physical video, so they can post it. So that way everyone looks at it, it goes viral, they get their clickbait, they get their money, and then that video goes out there. The documentative evidence, or with the declassified documents, that can be used to support it. So there's a whole bunch of other things, and then there's analogical evidence, which you can draw, which comes from memories, which comes from trauma. But when you have all these things on its own, it's hard for you to prep that case so that way you can translate that into a specific code that was violated so you can process that in a court system. So my approach is trying to collect enough evidence and build a case strong enough that should an opportunity to present this to a court system, I would be able to at least convince the jury that, you know, there is something going on and I need assistance with mental health because because we need to rule out that as being an equation. We need, because I've already ruled out all these other things, because the evidence shows that these people are experiencing trauma as an effect to not getting the answers. The government is not giving us answers, or maybe they are and it's just not what they expect, and they're not obligated to tell us anything. And at the same time, if they don't know anything, it's not good for them to tell us that either, because then we'll overthrow, because we don't feel confident about our governments not knowing. So there's that illusion that they do know, but at the same time, they could very well not know. And there's a lot of stuff like that going in. So with this evidence part, the experiencer, it depends on what you're trying to prove. So the experiencer has the experience. Like with my experience, I don't need to prove anything. I know. But I mean, I only need to prove that if say my experience told me to do some crazy things and I'm using that as my defense in court later on. That's not going to really fly, because, and people use that as excuses all the time. God told me to do it, or Satan told me to do that. Well, let's bring Satan in here and let's see what he says. So that kind of index. But if you're trying to prove this to be real for the entire world, you need a lot of different types of evidence, and you have to build a case. So what I mean by that, when you look at my work on the website, so experiencersupport.org, under investigations tab, check out the visual evidence database, which will have a list of all the cases I've published so far for 2019 to 18 to 20. I'm still working on 21 and 22 right now to upload. And then that'll kind of give you a generalization of all the cases that I've done. You can separate them to whatever category you're investigating, or you can look at the whole thing. But when you add all the evidence, types of evidence, to the same map, and as well as a timeline, so there's a timeline on there too, because you can see it in chronological order, you start to see how these evidence can play on each other. So, for example, I'm trying to just pulling this from memory, but somewhere in Moose Jaw, I believe it was Canadian Forces base in Moose Jaw, had a declassified document that I retrieved that talked about an orb, a bright orange orb in the sky. That alone is a good piece of evidence to support the idea that something unexplained happened. It's on a military base, and it was reported by military police. So the assumption is that is a credible report because it comes from a credible source. But at the same time, there's no video, there's no picture, there's no audio, there's nothing traceable to be able to determine what it is. At least that's been provided. Down the road, not too far on the map, you will see some experiencer cases where the witness had seen orbs in the sky, and wasn't able to take photographs, but was able to draw. And when they drew, sounded or looked like what was being described with this document. And then if you further, so that piece of information on its own is a drawing, because we don't have a picture, and that's not going to be accepted, but it gave a clue. And then if you go further down on the map, we might actually be in another province from what I'm seeing in my mind here, but there was a picture of something that looked like an orb. So those three pieces of evidence, three different cases, all perhaps describing the same thing, all of a sudden those three pieces of evidence become a case to support the possibility of circular objects floating in the sky. The government doesn't know what it is. Civilians are seeing it years later down the road, and then this person was able to take a picture. So that's another thing that most of these investigators and researchers are doing out on the internet. They're not building their case. They're putting out their evidence as an individual base, and they're getting ripped apart because they don't have a foundation. And that requires time, that requires resources, that requires money, that requires expertise. What I'm trying to push, if you will, is the awareness that I have all that and I'm doing all that. And if you have something, then you can submit it, and then we can build this database together, and then have a stronger case to take and fight whatever battle you need to fight. But at the same time, gives me the opportunity to teach people how to investigate. It gives me the opportunity to learn from others who might not have any background, that just been doing this for many years and picked it up as a hobby and happens to pick up a trick. Especially in the PI world, I rely a lot on my confidential informants, and if they have expertise in these certain things. So once we have that, then what do we do with it? So with the Experiencer Support Association, the goal through the investigations. Now I just represent the investigative side. There is a support side as well. So tonight. So today is Wednesday, November 30th. So I'm not quite sure when this goes up, but if it goes up today, we have what's called Experiencers Anonymous, which is for experiencers to come forward if they wish and share their experiences in a comfortable, safe setting. So that would parallel to like an Alcohol Anonymous or NA kind of type scenario where you're just free to talk about your experiences. And then we also have referrals to regression and to Reiki and to hypnotherapy and all these other things, because we don't want the experiencers to live in trauma while we're investigating. And so that comes from the law enforcement side, where we show up to a scene, and even as a security guard, we have to de-escalate. There's trespassing. We need to, then the investigator stuff comes in. We need to take care of the witness, and then get all the facts, do the investigation before we come to this conclusion. So the reason why I want all this information and doing it this way, so I can better understand the support that the experiencers need, which the human beings need, so they don't continue to live in fear. They don't continue to live depressed. They don't continue to harm themselves because they're not getting answers. I'm not going to be able to get answers from the government, because the government will release whatever they want to release when they want. But in the meantime, my focus is making sure that these people are not victim to normal things like actual abuse or actual theft or trespassing or harassment by men in black, because they could be actual people, or bad PIs, if you will. So, that's kind of my angle here, is to police the UFO and paranormal community.
Well, I respect that as well as I appreciate that. Coming from an investigative perspective, I think that finding all the facts and collecting all the facts and ensuring that the witness or the victim, whichever case it may be, to be taken care of is an admirable thing to do. When I say this, probably get in
And,
trouble for
and,
saying
and
that.
once they're de-escalated, so I'm sure you can
Yeah.
appreciate this, coming to a scene, and they're giving you information in a very hyper state of mind.
Yes.
Maybe they're witness to a suicide, witness to something. Who knows? It's drastic. So you're taking that information, you're calming them down, but that's still facts. That's still evidence. But
Yep.
then they calm down, and then you wait. They go to the hospital, all these other things, and then the next day you go and you do your investigation. You talk to them. Then you get their statement while they're balanced, or at least a little bit better. But then you compare that to what you got at the beginning to see where the middle is, to see what the
Right.
fact is, to build your case. So a lot of times, and I mean, a majority of the time in my career with MUFON, there was no bedside manner. It was just straight facts, straight data. What can I use to put on the internet to publish our books, to do all this other stuff? There was no care for the experiencers, except for in the abduction research team with
Right.
Kathleen Martin. That's why I like to be in there, because they provide the compassion. But it was two separate things,
Right.
none of them doing it together. So the Experiencer Support Association is based on the idea of combining those elements, because we need to get the information when the event happened as soon as possible, within the first 48. That's a thing. It's not
Right.
just a TV show. That's a legitimate,
That's
good,
legitimate. Yep.
legitimate timeline to be working within. And then take all this time to build the case and figure it all out, send them for treatment, see if that helps to make sure that they're sane, and all these other things. Because if you can prove the credibility of the source, if this ends up in trial, that's the
Right.
first thing that the defense lawyers do, is they try to prove the test, cross-examine or discredit the other side. And things like being under the influence of alcohol, or being diagnosed with schizophrenia, are not legitimate excuses to dismiss a case.
Exactly.
Those are just parts and information for you to understand, and then as an investigator, it's your job to figure out whether or not this particular um, condition matters to the facts of the case.
Well done,
And
Ryan. I have to say, well
so,
done. I mean, there's not a lot of other individuals. I mean, we in law enforcement sometimes, the department, I work for two different departments. One was a much larger department than a smaller department, but the same thing scoped across is that, we always had to make sure that we remembered that whoever we had seen as a witness or a victim is still a human being first, and that human being has to be addressed as a human being. You still have to show compassion. You still have to show understanding. You still have to, yes, you have to collect the facts. You have to collect everything that you need to do, especially like you just said. Brilliant approach, the way that you're putting this forward. You'd have made a
thanks.
great cop, by the way.
I've been told that. I've been told
Yeah,
that
it's
many times,
it.
and I respect the law enforcement. I respect what they're doing too, and I'm very grateful to have the freedom that I have, because there's a lot of restrictions and there's a lot of slack. But I I'm always for the people. I'm actively involved with my community. My company, which is Blacklight, is actively involved with helping those without housing. Like we
Right.
do a lot of things for people. And where the paranormal and my interest in the paranormal and UFO comes in is I do believe that there is something happening, because I had this experience, but it could be normal, it could be human. And
Right.
even if the government knows that, it would be it wouldn't be advantageous, or it wouldn't be smart for them to encourage us to strengthen our minds so we can read people's minds and take over the world, because it's something they couldn't prevent.
Right.
So, but there are some of us figuring that out on our own, and we're doing it. And then, as long as we're doing it for good things, of course. In law enforcement, have you ever used a psychic to locate a missing person?
I personally have not, but I do believe in it. I have used investigative hypnosis. I'm also
Mm-hmm.
certified as an investigative hypnotist in regard to regressing individuals back to traumatic incidents. So I
That's
do
good to know.
understand where you come from that perspective
Yeah.
as well. I did do that. I did not consult a psychic during any time period, but I do believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that other individuals, I've spoken with other individuals, I've had conversations with people who have utilized a psychic in regard to that. And I've actually solved cases with the information that was provided. It wasn't always admitted into court, of course, so they had to substantiate other factors in order to get the evidence that was collected, they had to make sure that they did everything by the numbers so that
And
it
you
would go
also
into court.
need to make sure you investigate the psychic.
Exactly.
Because how did you know that? Sure, that was a
Exactly.
good guess. Are you really psychic?
Or were you
Give me
part
Yeah,
of
give
it?
me your fingerprints and your DNA right now, because I need to
Yeah.
make sure that you didn't do this.
That you weren't the one that left that there.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
mean, so it's not paranormal anymore to me. It's how long it was paranormal, but now it's normal. It's just normal human behavior. And if we can teach the people to evolve their experiences and remove the darkness or remove the negativity, in theory, they would start to use that energy to help heal people. You can use Reiki, you can use regression hypnotherapy for
right.
trauma. It doesn't have to be connected to UFOs or paranormal. At the same time, this might be what we use to escape from the troubles of the world. At the same time, not recognizing that, we might have these abilities and these gifts that are underdeveloped, and we're evolving. And if we are able to do that, then why not, start a business trying to help other people? Because that's what it's all about. That's what these Reiki and hypnosis and yoga
Everybody else is
instructors,
doing.
all that spiritual stuff, they're making money by creating wellness in the workplace. Like, it's all part of it.
Oh,
And I don't see anything supernatural unless the source is so intelligent, so divine, that they're interfering outside of this realm, that nobody can control it. I'm not seeing any evidence of this secret shadow government and all this other stuff. But at the same time, it still could exist. But I
In,
find that very unlikely, because it'd be very hard to pull off.
in all the cases that you have investigated through MUFON and through TESA, have you ever come up with any cases that you felt were unexplained to you?
Yes, I have. So I have. Well, I can't say solved. I've concluded a possible identification, we'll say, for I would say 95% of the cases I've done. So I've closed well over 1,200 cases with MUFON alone. I'm almost at 500 cases with TESA. So I'm almost at 2,000 cases in my career in this of me investigating on my own. And 95% of those have led me to um, known explanations, and the witnesses agree with it. Right, that's the important. As I can't confirm because I wasn't there, but if the witness agrees with the facts of the case as well and accepts a known explanation for it, then there's that. And there's still that small percentage of things that can't be explained. So when they draw beings that look like lizards, that look like extraterrestrials, is that coming from television? Is that coming from books? Is that coming from the Bible? Because that's in the Bible. Where is this information coming from? But at the same time, I've ruled out in these circumstances the credibility of the witness, the credibility of the case, the credibility of all these other things. All the available evidence is in front of me, and I'm looking at a description of something that does not look normal based on what we're told. And then with this classification system, they would go under beings observed, and then I'm going to start to work with my resident, with Alex Mistretta, which is a very close friend of mine, and he's a cryptozoologist. I recommend talking to him. He's really versed on that. He understands UFOs, former MUFON guy as well, and paranormal guy, but he coined the word cryptozoology, which is also used in the classification system to explain this not so normal beings of monsters or whatever they could be. So what we're trying to do is get enough visual data where we can look at these beings, remove the label, and try to figure out what these beings have in common. So it's called a compare and contrast. And when we look at, so I guess in law enforcement, that this would be my TESA's most wanted. So these images of, have you seen these people? And a lot of people are seeing similar reptoids and insects and all these other things. Now, do they exist in this reality? I don't know. Having a consciousness experience, it's possible it's in the mind, people seeing it in these dreams, all these other things. But when I look at these people and understand how they got to the experience, there is not a pattern. Some of these people are high end certified and decorated individuals seeing these beings. There are some people on the low end that might be perceived as underprivileged or disabled, or all these labels that could be used by the skeptics to attack them for, but seeing the same thing. What makes it? But they're seeing the same thing. Their status doesn't matter in this sense because the investigations were done. But then now when we have this compare and contrast, how does this person on another side of the world draw the same thing that this person saw on this side of the world or seen on this side of the world? I know as the investigator, they don't know each other. And my question is, what the F is, am I looking at? Because being the investigator, I know that I ruled all these things out. I know that I cross-checked and I asked them to go to the doctors and they did all this other stuff. They went through the hoops, and I'm still looking at things. And you multiply that with many, many cases. There's beings out there that these people are seeing. And now, are they seeing them in our dreams? Are they seeing it in another dimension? Are they seeing that in this other place? That I can't determine, but the evidence is enough to know that they believe it's happening. They're not the only ones who's experiencing it, and there needs to be some sort of explanation or resource provided for those to cope with it, so that way they don't live in fear. Because we don't even know if those on the other side are aware that we're seeing them. They might be looking at us like intention. That's another thing that's missing with investigations. If you look at the paranormal shadow figure, be the scenario, you're in bed, you're alone, the doors are locked, you know that the house is safe. You open your eyes and you see these beings standing outside your bed. That is terrifying because the immediate thought is intruder inside the house. But we don't know often with experiencer cases the intent that's implied with that experience. We don't know if they were there as a friendly. We don't even know if they know that you can see them until they do something or they respond, and then you get confirmation, and then that's when we get into that abduction phenomenon. So when we do like, I guess, the Ouija board phenomenon or scenario, you're doing a seance, you're intentionally asking for an experience to happen. You don't know if the Ouija board is moving because of extraterrestrial or paranormal, or someone else in the room has this psychic ability that's underdeveloped that they don't know that they have, and they really believe, and they imagine it to move, and the object moved, and it's the source inside the room that moved it. And at the same time, you don't know if another place on the other side of the world all of a sudden just experienced paranormal activity because that group thought is sending a message out to this place and we're not knowing where it's going. Another example would be, I'm at the end of my day, I'm having a bad day, I need to pray. I'm praying to Source, I'm praying to God, and I'm asking God for the answers to solve my problem. Meanwhile, simultaneously, there's someone on the other side of the world that's meditating and spreading love and light simultaneously at the same time. What's to say that I'm not receiving the positive messages that they're putting out at the same time I'm asking to receive a message from God? And I take that positive and I decide, to do something with it. I'm not seeing proof of any specific being. What I'm seeing is proof that we as human beings have the ability to reach this place, send information, receive information, but because there's so many people working against each other and so closed-minded, that we're not realizing that we're perhaps interacting with each other on a daily basis.
I agree with that. I think that we all, as a society, as a human beings, we all are collectively connected to the universe. We just have to open our minds and be able to
And
accept that.
And when we're
And
looking at a suspect, like who
yeah,
is responsible, it's easier to locate a human being than it is for me to locate an extraterrestrial because I can't get into space. But I mean, so when I normalize it or I apply these human elements to it, there's human involvement. But the strange thing is there's also evidence of the governments in the past experimenting with said technology and said phenomenon because they knew it existed. So how do we know that they don't have that and they're using it to manipulate us? There's a challenge there because that's also possible. And if they say UFOs exist, that, especially with the push in America for disclosure, if they come out and say yes, UFOs exist, that means aliens exist, that means Bigfoot exists, that means ghost exists, and that also means the people that believe that what they dreamt was a dream and they weren't actually molested or attacked by aliens is actually true. And so what I'm working on is not for disclosure. I'm understanding disclosure. I'm keeping track of all these other stuff. I'm on the toes of everything. I just posted a declassified secret document from the Department of National Defense before I came on here. It's new. It's fresh off the press. 50-second video that they have about lights in the sky. I mean, it could be nothing. It could be a satellite, but I mean, I'm doing all that other stuff because it's still possible that they're keeping secrets. But at the same time, it's possible that they're not, right? So what I'm working on is what happens after disclosure. I appreciate and acknowledge that there's people that want those answers and there's a fight for that. That may not be the approach I take, but I'm involved enough to be in the loop. But I'm also analyzing enough to anticipate eventually some sort of information with all this adventure, and eventually we're going to get an answer from something. What I'm not seeing is any mental health support services to assist the people in understanding or living with this new transition. And that's what the Experiential Support Association is the foundation of, is to create that environment of where you go to while you're currently experiencing, and then or after we get disclosure or after we get confirmation, because police and hospitals are going to be inundated with people thinking that they may be part of this phenomenon as well, when they might not actually be. They might just
well,
be
and you know,
fan.
I agree with you. I think, especially even here in the United States, especially in the United States, they finally started releasing some information that would say, well, we can't really explain this. We're going to give you a few things that we can't explain. We're not going to give you everything, but we're going to say, yes, we know that you're not, forgive me for this, we know that you're not all stupid or you're not all, you're not just gullible. We
Hmm.
understand that, that things have evolved enough where we can tell you this is unexplained. We cannot explain this. But on the same hand, I also believe that the government does maybe know more than what they say. That's the reason we've got
And and
this
if they
recorder
do,
in my hand.
then can we not just trust that they have our best intentions? And the reason why we don't know about it is because of how we would react.
Well,
If you
I
compare
agree.
our reaction to the pandemic,
Yeah,
majority of the people handled that bad.
very
And
badly.
and if that was extraterrestrials, maybe that's a lesson to be like, you know what, they're not ready for aliens because they can't handle a flu. Like,
Yeah,
so, hold on a second. So if that information is available to the government and they know that, then we can trust that it's handled because they're not farming us, they're not killing us, they're not
right.
doing all these things in a massive way. Now, it could be some select cases of people that people go missing all the time. That could be an explanation for that. Who knows? But it's not significantly impacting society to the point that we need the government to tell us. We just want to know. But the truth is, we just want to know why we're having these experiences ourselves. So instead of fighting them for the
Hmm.
answer, my approach is and the reason why I get these information is because they know that I'm defending them too. Because if there's no evidence to incriminate them, because they also have the opportunity to provide the information, so they know damn well who they're giving it to. I'm not a media request. I'm a private sector
Right.
investigator asking for freedom of information. That is a different ask than a journalist who intends to go public about it.
Yeah.
So they cooperate with me a little bit more and they give me more information because they know my role is to balance the scales. This is what they said. This is the facts. This is connected to this, but it doesn't mean that. It's government machines, it's secret technology, but the government is aware of it. So if the government is aware of it, why are they lying? Or why are they omitting it? It's the why, and it's to protect us. Because if it is special tech, we don't want our Russian adversaries to know about it.
Exactly.
We don't want anyone to know about it. But we're seeing it. And why are we seeing it? Because they have to test it. They need to use it. They need to travel. There's more people out there looking. There's more
Right.
people with cameras. But so they're doing secret things and we can trust that. And they're just going over places they probably shouldn't be and we're catching on to it and they're not giving us an answer. So my suggestion to the government would be, stick to your private flight routes or intercept these objects before they come into our airspace because we're observing.
We're going to know. I mean, you
Yeah.
brought up X Files earlier in the
Mhm.
conversation. It's just like the X Files. We just want to know. We just want to know. It's just one of those things. What do you think of? I got to tell you something here when we get done about the X Files
Yeah.
and a connection to that. Um, what do you think of Project Blue Book and like Helnick, how he separated himself from that and kind of created his own? In fact, I think he even consulted for ET and some
And,
other.
and, and Kufos or whatever his organization there.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting fact. So J. Allen Hynek is the creator of the classification system, the original classification system, and then paired with Jacques Vallée, who created their combined classification system for the UFO phenomenon, which is what MUFON used. So when I was introduced to that classification system, it was that classification system that I used to create my ultra spectrum classification system, which is an enhancement to that classification system. Now, I showed that to Paul Hynek, which is J. Allen Hynek's son, and we went through it. And I got the family's blessing to kind of talk about it and do all that as a next generation
Very,
classification system
very
used.
cool.
I have not been able to speak to Valet about it, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm more on Hynek's side than Valet's side in terms of things, but I do understand Valet and with the the ETH, I guess, extraterrestrial. hypothesis, or the interdimensional or interdimension, whatever ITH. So, what do I think about Hynek and leaving a government organization to pursue the interest with the and focus on the civilians and take care of them? I love that. It's inspiration. That is why I do what I do. I followed his line of work quite closely, and I may not be an astrophysicist. I may not be an astronomer like he is, and I may not have all the connections that he did at the past, but I understood his classification system. I understood his investigative process, and I literally worshipped on that and created this system that I'm using today based on the philosophy of his work. So I'm heavily influenced by Hynek, and instead of talking about it, I'm doing the work as if he did. And fun fact, he died 2 months before I was born. And someone, so if you want to look at
Wow.
past life and regressions and all this other stuff, I'm not saying, but I mean,
Hey,
I
reincarnation, I believe
often,
in it.
I
So,
often thought, you know, why am I interested in this work so much? It's an odd coincidence that I learned after the fact, but I'm not saying I'm Hynek. I'm just saying there's a neat coincidence to learn that we're only 2 months apart from his death and my birth. So,
well, sometimes, we don't get to finish what we want to do
yeah.
in this life and it needs to be continued. So the possibility does exist. I believe in that. I do.
It all exists. Either none of this exists or all of it exists.
It always,
And the reason why I'm so drawn into this is the same reason I'm drawn into investigations. I love looking at the facts. I love solving the case. I like figuring out the problems, and I'm very good at that. And I get paid a lot of money to help a lot of things. But in this part, this is volunteer. This is all a service. But I'm applying those skills because I've learned so much. But at the same time, I know enough about the subject to know I'm right, but not enough to know if I'm wrong.
that's a
This
good
is
place to be, though. It really is, because when you stop and think about it, because if you felt that you had everything figured out, you would just stop.
I get close and then I'm like, okay, this part of it, but it's
Exactly.
bigger. And once you put it all together, it's just deep down inside. It's uninformed human beings evolving to become great things without any help, without any assist, and a lack of support on the mental health side to encourage them to just be being weird, to be, which is not weird anymore. It's normal,
Being human.
and be human. And the human being is paranormal, but I think it was just, well, then you get into the whole rabbit hole of uh, divine influence, star seeds and things like that too. Like you gotta, there's so many opposing theories. So sticking to facts, the evidence shows that we do emit energy and we do absorb energy. Energy can be information can be transmuted to energy,
Yeah.
electricity and all this other stuff. So it's possible for us to send out and receive. And if it's possible for us to send out and receive, it's possible for them to send out and receive. 9 times out of 10, we assume that is some external force from outer space. But what we don't often think about and consider is that it could be us. I didn't do it. It's the first thing that narcissists say, but maybe they did do it. They just don't want to say it. It wasn't me. What what was in you? Sorry, officer. I assumed you were coming here to arrest me. It's like, oh, I just happened to, it wasn't me. Like, but it was them. Like it. We do not naturally consider ourselves as being the source, and that's due to the many years of societal upheavals and all the problems we have in the world. So, and as a former law enforcement officer, you know that you're in the middle of the system, trying to keep the people safe, keep the peace, keep them alive. You know, yeah, you murdered someone, but I understand. There's the criminology, right? Why did you do that? You sympathize and you empathize, but end of the day, you still did it. You got to go to jail. I'm sorry. Like it's tough,
Hey,
and
look,
and
I've been lucky enough in my career to have individuals that were felons I arrested that sent me a card afterwards and said, "Thank you for treating me like a human being." And I appreciate that, even though you didn't. you didn't treat me like a felon. You treated me like a human being, and this allowed me to be able to reflect back on my life. So it's
Yeah,
just
and
we just have
when
to
I was in college for policing, I majored in criminology and political science. So when I was my career path, if I had gone into policing, would have been detective, high end criminology and forensic investigation. So I'm applying those skills now to the UFO community. When I guess I could go and get paid to do it, but I mean, then it becomes a job, and but it's not. But it is a job. It's a
but it's your
mission.
passion.
It's a passion. It's not a hobby. It's now a mission. I've
There you go.
worked really hard. I've created a budget line to be able to afford to fund this project for myself so I can do this for a living. Now that I'm able to do that, I'm looking for resources and help and professional partners that don't have to worry about the bills, just direct me in the right way, but at the same time, don't trick me because I'm an investigator. I can figure out who you
Figure that
are.
out. Yeah, we can figure it out.
So I've also run into a lot of challenges where, um, even though I exposed an issue with MUFON at the time, there's this lack of trust because people feel that, oh well, if you work with Ryan, then Ryan's an investigator. He's going to pull my record, and the speeding ticket I got 10 years ago is going to be on the internet or things like that too. So I'm kind of in this lone wolf scenario where I have no choice but to do this on my own. I don't expect to have any help. But at the same time, I really don't know if what I'm doing matters as much as I believe it does with the amount of time and effort I put into that. I'm not getting validation, I'm not getting confirmation. And I really hope that when I help these individuals, I'm leading them in a positive path because, you know, there's a lot.
Well, I
Someone's
think
going to do.
we as individuals want answers. We have an innate desire to understand. That's why we all want to know the future. That's why we want to read our horoscope every day. What's going to happen to me today? What's why we pay the psychic $20 or $50 to say, am I going to meet the one that I love? Am I going to get the job I want? We all want to know. So
Yeah,
I think
but
that's
all
what
those methods are risky because it's
exactly,
interpretation. You're going to
exactly
pay for like a horoscope, even if we share the same sign, we're going to take from that two different meanings
what we
based on our
want.
entire day.
It's all
Exactly.
subjective. It's all subjective.
And to charge a tarot card or like tarot card reading is subjective. I'm okay with that. I have challenges with those mediums that guaranteed a connection with the afterlife and you're paying for that. I would much rather them charge for the service and the time and then have it on the table that we may connect, we may not.
Right.
But there are a lot of people out there that guarantee psychic connection, pay me millions of dollars.
Those are people
If
taking
you,
advantage
if
of
you,
people.
yeah, if you can guarantee it, then you should a be,
But
giving it to the world,
in between you
or
and
be,
I, that's the
yeah.
reason there are individuals that profess to be these. I'll talk to the dead. I'll talk to your dead loved one, but it's going to cost you $200
What
if
is that
you're
$200 paying for? Is it paying for your
exactly.
time, or
And
am
you're
I getting a
going,
result?
and they're going. No, I guarantee it. I will guarantee I'll talk to your loved one, or I won't guarantee it. So if you, I think, what was it, 7 years ago? Um, and I'm really going to be bad about this. Sylvia,
Sylvia Brown?
Sylvia Brown.
Yeah.
My wife wanted to go to a Sylvia Brown event, and we paid $75 a piece because that's where she wanted to go. You had to make my wife happy, right?
Yeah.
We paid the $150. We got up to this area that said more likely she'll choose you if you pay for this area. I'm showing this down below the camera, but you know, if you pay $35, you get the seats in the back, and she may not call on you.
So they pre-select it. So she pre-selects. That's interesting.
Okay,
And then that would mean it's stacked deck. So you understand what psychographics are?
I do.
Yeah. So when you purchase a ticket, you provide information, and what you're paying for is not just for Sylvia Brown, but for the host and the expenses and all that other stuff. So it's acceptable to pay for that. They might get a small
Right.
percentage of that, but when you have thousands and thousands of people, there might be $3,000 she gets for the day. But when you purchase the ticket, you provide your email address, your home number, all that information, and then they take it to the marketing team, and then they look at your Facebook, they look at all this other stuff, and they find all this stuff beforehand, and then they will pick you because they know where you're sitting. And
Yep.
then they will say all these things, and you will believe it. How did they know that? It's marketing. It's not magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's so when I test these mediums, and I haven't been able to find one that's willing to follow my trust me enough to do it, but it's give an example. This Matt Fraser. Matt Fraser is a real. I do enjoy Matt Fraser in terms of listening to him as a Hightown psychic, and my wife has been involved, but we've paid for a lot of these virtual things, and we never got picked, even though they're intimate. I paid the extra to try to figure it all out. But then when I did an experiment where I gave more information because I also didn't give enough because I didn't want them to have anything to read. So that at the same time, maybe we didn't get picked because we didn't give them anything to read. And
Information.
I made a fake, not with Matt Fraser, but a different scenario. I made a fake profile that had a bunch of things, and I made an account, and I had a reading done by that, impersonating this fake person, and they told me all this life that I had made up. So I can prove that in this particular case that happens. Now, does that happen all the time?
I agree with that. There are instances, like I said,
Should people
I
get paid
do.
for their time? Yes,
Yeah,
right. But
I do know that
as the
there.
I was just going to say, as a final thought, as the consumer, the one who's making the purchase, pay attention to what you're paying for. And if you're guaranteed results, don't buy that. But if you're guaranteed an opportunity to be picked and or the chance, it's like the lottery,
Yeah.
right? At least be happy with your purchase because it's your money, you work hard for it. And for those who are on assistance and are on fixed income or limited income, to have to pay $250 for to find out, well, that's ridiculous. And then with the Experience Support Association, the reason why we charge for some of our services and raising money and doing all these other things is for those who actually need it. And if they can't afford it, then we'll cover half or all of it. We'll do whatever. So there's the charitable side of
You
the
take that
Experience.
into consideration, which is a good thing. Let
Yeah.
Ryan, let's talk about that a little bit. How somebody can get a hold of you at the TESA organization and or otherwise and listen to your podcast.
Yeah. So, excuse me, I've been drinking pop. I got a bit of a
That's
burp
okay.
here.
I've been breathing in the landscapers cutting all these dead trees and stuff out front. So
Oh, got a lot of sawdust. Okay, so you can find me in many different places. I'm representing the Experience Support Association, so that's what I want you to go first. So go to experienceyoursupport.org. It's on the screen here. From there, you'll see a tab for investigators, for experiencers, a whole bunch of things that's going on. As for me individual, including the podcast, which I'll leave for the end, me individually, you can find me on facebook.com/heed the world, where I post all my stuff, all my findings on there on a daily basis. I'm very interactive on that as well. You can also find me on Twitter if need be. That's where the disclosure stuff happens. The podcast airs every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but tomorrow, or so Thursday, I don't know, when does this air?
this won't air for a couple of weeks.
Okay, so when you see this, go back to the channel. You'll see our final season finale, which is with Richard Dolan. He is our season finale closer for season 4. I have a good history with Richard Dolan. He's the one who gave me the opportunity to do what I do. He plucked me out of MUFON and encouraged me to do this venture too. So there's a bunch of side stuff with that. But then the new season will start in January, I think January 12th for season 5. And we just started a new podcast called Currencia, which is starting in 2023 as well. So you can find that on our YouTube, which is youtube.com/the Experience Your Support Association, or just Google TESA, the Experience Your Support Association in YouTube, and you'll find it. Subscribe to all that other stuff.
And that's TESA.
Yeah, TESA. It'd be better if you put the Experience Your Support or Experience Your Support YouTube will come up. Like whatever keywords you want to use, whatever you remember. right? Experiencer Support Association is the thing. So if you go to the website, you'll find all the other people like CC, who runs the Experiencer Anonymous group. We're going to have a list of our professional partners, a list of some of our private resources that are going to be there too. As an experiencer too, and an investigator, I do provide free resources on the website with little things I use for my investigation as a quick cheat sheet for me to use while I'm on the go. At the same time, it's available. It's always being updated. And for the experiencers, there's a list of worksheets from treatment programs such as CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, and DBT. A bunch of worksheets that are used to process the information, so that way, when you're experiencing an event and you're exhibiting anxiety and stress and all these other things, you can work on it. And we're basically trying our best to at least walk that fine line where we're able to direct you to resources that are clinically approved until we're able to officially make it known where we can actually hire a clinician to provide actual mental health support. But to find one that is able to practice and accept the possibility of extraterrestrial and all this other stuff is very rare. But I do have a lot of private clients that I could refer you to if you make a report on the investigation side, so submit a report, that are willing to do that through referral. And they're banking on this being successful, so that way they can come public too. So there's a private network of professionals that want to help, but we have these challenges where they could lose their job. Another benefit for me being a private investigator, owning my own company, is I'm my own boss, and no one ain't going to fire me. If I was a police officer doing this, we might have the SIU looking in that. We might, who knows? There might be some ethical things.
Well,
Um,
I personally, I think that you're providing an opportunity for people to get some help, to get some understanding, to have some compassion, to have some camaraderie, and say, "I'm not
our,
alone."
mo- our motto is, "We believe you. You're not alone." The whole selling point is that we want you to feel included. We want you to feel a part of this. I may not agree with what you think has happened. That's my job in the investigation side. But once I acknowledge that you need support, my team will support you in understanding it. Because if I happen to conclude that it was a light refraction or something like that, and you really wanted it to be God, I need a sensitive bedside team that's going to communicate that to you,
Yeah.
so that way you understand it and you don't lose your mind because you were really hoping. Because there's hope in belief. So I'm not the first person you want to talk to. I'm the last person you want on this case. But at the same time, I built a team because I understand that you need that. That comes from the idea of victims crisis, right? Whenever something happens,
Exactly.
uh, and like a suicide or something, a sudden death, this volunteer organization comes and takes care of the
Yep.
family when police and all the emergency services leave. Don't just leave them by themselves. So that's essentially what the support team is there for. I'm the
Well,
guy who's
that's admirable. I
figure
think
out
that
what's going on.
you provide an opportunity for people to get help and to, again, we're not alone kind of an atmosphere, which I appreciate very much. And I'll make sure that everything and every opportunity to connect with you will be in the show notes as well, so people can have an easy way just to follow a link. So that
Perfect.
if you can't remember, if you're driving and you're listening to this, don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. You can just click on it. Um, Ryan, this is one more thing before you go. So, do you have any advice for anybody that is as an experiencer that you might share with us? Words of wisdom?
Yeah. Advice for experiencers. So I guess since the theme of today's discussion was more so on the investigative side, less on the support side, um, my advice would be to emphasize on the support. So if you have an experience, the worst thing for you, I believe, is to keep it inside. And I think when you're deciding on who you should report it to, you should report it to people that you trust, but you need to understand, or at least know, what it is you want in return. Are you just reporting it for a campfire story, or do you want results and all these other things? And at the same time, understand that my approach is my approach based on my experience and my learning and all this other stuff. It may not be the best approach. If I'm the only thing that you have come across to, I would prefer you to reach out to other resources that are available. Use MUFON if you think that they're qualified to get you their answers, because they have a different type of training and a different type of perspective. And you, as the experiencer, can take the analysis of what MUFON does, the analysis of what TESA does, the analysis of your neighbor or whatever, whoever else has looked at it, and you get all these different views and perspectives, and you sit down and look at that and decide how you're going to live the rest of your life, because it's your experience. And the reason why you want that experience to be investigated is because you want answers. But who am I to tell you what happened? It's your experience. If you believe it to be angels, if you believe it to be divine and is encouraging you to hold the door open for people, you don't need that investigated. I don't need to do that either. Save me some time. But, I guess the keynote is remember that I wouldn't be here, and everybody else that is in this phenomenon would not be here if you didn't report, if you didn't share. And the point of the Experience Support Association is to give back to those who have done that, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have anything to talk about if you guys didn't trust me with that stuff. And we have some people that are on that high horse that are charging a lot of money right now that forget that we put them there. So I guess, long story short, as an experiencer, do your research, use as many resources and get as many perspectives as you can to come to a conclusion for yourself. Accept it, and if it leads you into a positive direction, then do it. And if anyone judges you, deal with that with anything in this world. And hang out with TESA and all the resources we have, and feel like a community, or anything else that is needed. Because there's a lot of people that don't have this. So I'd rather you have it and not need it than not have it.
Brilliant, brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. I
Thank you.
think it's communication. I think the thing I got out of that, the key to that is communicate.
Hmm.
You can't get any help if you don't communicate.
That's true. And I can't help you if you don't tell me what you want.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
I will ask this. I know that you're based in Canada,
Yep.
and yes, it is an online thing. You are accessible to. I'm heard internationally, so you are accessible to anyone from outside the Canada and the United States.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about my investigative process, which I think you would also appreciate, is I don't need to physically go to these locations. I just need to know what evidence is available and how to retrieve it. So if it's safe to do so, I'll use the experiencer to collect the evidence. So if I need daytime photos to see what you were looking at in the sky, I don't need to hop on a plane and fly to the UK to take the pictures myself. I just tell you how to take the pictures, and if
Right.
you do that, and it takes the experiencer through that process, and if we come up and I am able to identify it, it's easier for that experiencer to accept an identified disposition, because they were part of the process,
Right.
right? So that's how I can do that internationally. If I'm going to go to a physical location, it's not a place that's haunted. It's not a place that has sighting. It's a hot spot that has a group of things there, and I'm inviting people of like-minded that have this ability to make contact, and I want them to move these objects, because I don't think it's a haunted location. I just think it's people who have psychic abilities going to these marketed places, and all with this high consciousness accidentally moving objects on their own, not realizing they're doing it themselves.
That makes a lot of
It's
sense. Yeah.
it's everywhere. It's here. It's now. It's there. It's everywhere. I can meditate and go anywhere in the world. It's
Absolutely. Been there, done that, I'll say.
yeah.
Ryan, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your journey, and how you got to where you're at and what you provide to this world. So thank you
And
for doing that. I hope that you continue to do it. If there's anything that I can do to help promote that, I am here to do that for you.
well, I appreciate that, and I just want to kind of say thank you to you who prepped me before the show to inform me of your previous service as law enforcement, because I was indexing on that and I was able to talk in an element that I don't often talk in, because I am not used to talking to other officers. So this is a very good podcast for me.
Really appreciate it. Thank you again very much. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I hope I can call you friend, and
Sure.
I would love to have a conversation down the road with you again.
Brother
Uh,
in arms.
and yeah, brother in arms. There you go. Uh, I will be in touch. And again, thank you for being on One More Thing Before You Go.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.